The boy suddenly had a wild idea. He placed his music-playing headphones over the bird egg his father treasured most, and to his surprise, something incredible happened.
Love you so bad. Merde.
Nervously, he told his dad he'd done something stupid. But when they saw the egg had already hatched, his father just smiled and said, "Get ready to be a parent." What Thomas didn't know was that this foolish little act would soon lead him to create one of the most romantic adventures of his life. Thomas lived in the city with his mom, Paula, after his parents got divorced. His dad, Christian, was a bird researcher who had recently discovered a new migration route that could help save an endangered species of wild geese. Even though the local government didn't support his plan, Christian still managed to get 20 goose eggs with help from a friend. He was ready to put his idea into action. Since Paula and her boyfriend had to leave for work, Thomas was temporarily sent to stay with his father. Seeing his dad dressed in a strange burlap sack costume, Thomas felt completely out of place. And to make matters worse, the place didn't even have Wi-Fi. Christian was worried that radiation might harm the bird eggs, so he had already removed all the internet devices in the house. And the reason he dressed like that was so that when the baby birds hatched, they would immediately see him as their mother, and later follow him in flight along their migration route. Paula, hearing this, was speechless. After she left, Thomas wandered around the house bored, while his dad busied himself outside with things Thomas didn't understand at all. He complained about mosquitoes in the daytime, rats at night, and how he couldn't even sleep properly. Even making a phone call meant holding his phone out the window. Then one day, out of sheer boredom, Thomas placed his headphones on the bird egg, and that's when the story began. Knowing it was his mistake, he reluctantly put on that ridiculous costume. And just like that, Thomas, without meaning to, became the mother of a flock of wild geese. Christian built a simple flying machine, while Thomas walked the baby geese every day using a cart that mimicked the sound of the plane engine, guiding them by sound. Christian planned to load them into a trailer and take them to the Arctic, so the birds would see it as their place of origin, the starting point of their very first flight. By instinct, they would fly south for winter and return north when the snow melted. That cycle of migration would ensure they survive and reproduce. The specific plan was to drive north from France all the way to the Arctic Circle in northern Norway, and then use a light aircraft to lead the wild geese southward. They would cross the North Sea, Denmark, Germany, Luxembourg, and finally return to France, back home. Thomas couldn't help but ask, why not just fly in a straight line? That's when Christian revealed his true purpose. A straight path would pass through many man-made hazards that could kill the birds. His route was designed to be the safest, and once the geese had flown that route once, they'd remember it forever. By next year, more geese would join them, and the species could be saved. Thomas was captivated. Something inside him shifted. He wanted to witness the migration with his own eyes. From that moment on, Thomas became even more devoted to the baby birds. He mimicked gunshots to train them to flee from hunters. He even used a horn to simulate adult goose calls, helping them learn how to follow directions during their journey. Thomas also discovered that among the 20 baby geese, one was different, a barnacle goose. His father must have accidentally mixed in the wrong egg, but since cross-species raising wasn't scientifically valid, Christian decided to separate the young gosling. Thomas, however, saw this as a form of discrimination. Determined, he insisted the black goose grow up with the others. He even named it Akka. Later, Christian placed Thomas in the flying machine and released the young geese into the water. One by one, they lined up and swam toward their mother, obediently following Thomas. Christian was overwhelmed with excitement. He believed his plan would work. That passionate look in his eyes showed the obsession of a dedicated scientist, possibly the very thing that led to his divorce from Paula. To become even closer to them, Thomas didn't hesitate to lie in the water and keep the goslings company. Just days ago, he had been a city kid playing mobile games. Now, he could confidently explain bird behavior to his mother. Nature truly is the best teacher. Paula was shocked that Thomas now woke up at 8 a.m. every day. But she still reminded Christian that once they got to Norway, he absolutely must not let Thomas get on that makeshift aircraft. Christian agreed, But the moment Paola left, he turned around and began teaching Thomas more advanced flying skills. And soaring through the sky, that was a feeling Thomas would remember for the rest of his life. As the wild geese grew stronger and their wings filled out, the migration plan was finally set in motion. Once everything was ready, they departed. Their first stop was a bird research center where the geese were vaccinated. After that, they continued heading north. They would travel over 1,000 kilometers, passing through several countries until they reached Norway. Every frame along the journey looked like a breathtaking wallpaper. After a long and tiring trip, they finally arrived at their destination. The local nature reserve officer explained that, according to protocol, they needed to submit official permits and collect blood samples from the birds to test for viruses or diseases. But the entire process would take 8 days, and during that time, the geese would have to stay locked in cages. This made Christian uneasy because the stamp on the permit had been secretly added by the museum secretary at his request. If discovered, everything would be exposed. He couldn't wait 8 days, so on Sunday he decided to move ahead with the plan. The goslings followed the running Thomas, and for the first time, took flight into the sky. Christian was overwhelmed with joy. This is their first flight. From now on, this place is imprinted in their memory. Next spring they'll return here to build their nests and breed. Christian got into the aircraft, ready to lead the birds south, but the geese didn't seem interested. They ignored the noisy flying machine completely. Worse yet, the local authorities arrived. The geese had tested positive. Christian tried to explain that the positive result was expected since they had just been vaccinated, but it didn't help. The officials prepared to enter the water and capture the birds, having already called Paris and confirmed that the museum had never approved this project. While they argued, Thomas had already climbed into the aircraft and led the goslings onto the lake. Through the radio, Christian struggled to confess the truth. He had forged the documents, the museum had not approved the project, and it would all be shut down. The goslings would be taken away. Hearing this, Thomas made a wild decision. He started up the aircraft and took off with the wild geese before the local authorities could catch up. To everyone's surprise, the geese, who previously ignored the aircraft, now followed closely behind Thomas. It turned out they weren't following the plane, they were following Thomas. Christian shouted again and again for him to stop. But Thomas turned off the radio and embarked on the most romantic journey of his life. He focused hard, trying to recall everything his father had taught him about flying, calming his nerves as best he could. The geese flew alongside him, forming a perfect line behind their mother. There's nothing more romantic than the harmony between humans and nature. Later, Thomas landed near a lakeside to rest, and the goslings cuddled up around him. Back at the reserve, Christian was taken to the police station for violating regulations. But he didn't care about the charges, he only cared about his son's safety. Paola, upon hearing the news, rushed over from far away, leaving her boyfriend behind. Faced with his ex-wife's accusations and questions, Christian could only stand there in silence, unable to say a word. At dawn, the geese suddenly stirred. Thomas got up and spotted a wild lynx eyeing them from nearby. He was terrified, but still stood his ground, shouting fiercely to scare the predator away. Clearly, it was no longer safe to stay there. The next day, they were back on the move. But the fuel tank was nearly empty. Thomas had to find a place to refuel. After flying past a stunning emerald lake, he chose a small town to land. A kind girl spotted him and helped refuel the aircraft. Thomas took off once more, with the girl waving goodbye and recording the moment on her phone. The video went viral online, drawing massive attention. A reporter from Paris called Christian, saying Thomas had become a trending topic. Upon hearing news of their son, Christian and Paola were both overwhelmed with emotion. The police quickly used technology to locate him. Unaware of all this, Thomas was checking his route when he saw someone running toward him. He immediately took off again. Flying high through the skies, Thomas truly witnessed the migration of wild geese from the best possible view. The stunning Nordic scenery stretched before him. Majestic mountain ranges and silky lakes formed the perfect backdrop to their journey. In his 14 years of life, Thomas had never felt so free. He sent his father a message saying that he would fly all the way back to France. That meant he would have to fly more than 1,000 kilometers. Paula's long-suppressed anger finally erupted. Christian stared at the map and quickly realized if Thomas flew in the wrong direction, he could end up over the ocean, and the consequences would be devastating.
Il est fort, Thomas. Il va y arriver, il est fort.
Then came the real test. The sea that had just moments ago been stunningly beautiful was now suddenly shrouded in dark, ominous clouds. Lightning cracks, thunder shakes the air. In this terrifying world of black skies and violent winds, Thomas and his little geese seemed incredibly small. The fragile aircraft looked like it could be torn apart at any moment. Yet even in the storm, Thomas shouted words of encouragement to keep the flock together. The rain poured harder. As he pushed on through the storm, Thomas finally looked up and saw a glimmer of hope ahead. After a fierce battle with nature, he broke through the clouds and soared into the open sky. Thomas looked back anxiously. Then suddenly a few tiny black dots emerged from the blinding white clouds. He quickly counted. Akka was missing. His voice cracked as he shouted Akka's name, calling out again and again. Just when he was about to give up, a small black figure appeared at last. Akka had returned. Smiling with relief, Thomas gently pulled Akka into his arms.
N'aie pas peur, viens.
Why do humans always chase the skies and test their limits? Because the view from above is truly beyond imagination. With the hardest part behind them, Thomas led his flock southward. Below him, the landscape of Europe unfurled like a living painting. Endless fields, rows of charming houses, and vibrant forests in autumn colors. By evening, the golden sun cast a magical glow, turning Thomas and the geese into a breathtaking silhouette against the sky. They flew over a river as smooth as jade, while Christian, Paula, and Bjorn followed in their car, tracing Thomas's path. Along the way, many kind strangers offered their help and took photos with Thomas, eager to meet the boy who flew with birds. But Thomas never stopped. He kept moving forward. At last, they reached the home of Christian's friend. But after the long journey, Thomas had become severely dehydrated and was taken to the hospital. When he woke up, the first thing he asked was, "Are the geese okay?" Christian reassured him. They were safe. But he also told Thomas that the journey had to end now. Since the project wasn't officially approved, the authorities would clip the geese's wings. It wouldn't hurt them, but they would spend the rest of their lives in captivity.
Et c'est ça la solution que t'as trouvée? Tu vas tout arrêter comme ça? T'abandonnes? Après tout ce qu'on a fait?
Je suis désolé.
Christian was filled with guilt. He had nearly lost his son. He told Paula to take Thomas home. After all, he had already missed a lot of school. But the next morning, Thomas set off again with the geese. This time, it was his mother who supported him. Because she had witnessed her son's transformation, news outlets began covering Thomas's story. People everywhere praised the father and son for working together to return an endangered species to the wild. Wherever they flew, people waved in support. Some even wrote, "Thomas, you're amazing," in giant letters across their fields. He became a hero to children across the country. His mother was proud of him too. At dawn, the lake shimmered like an ink painting, birds flapping through the morning mist, waves gently rolling over the cold surface. In this final moment of the migration, Thomas turned off the engine. Letting the aircraft glide on natural lift, he surrendered himself to the sky, embracing the purest form of flight. They soared between sea and sky, becoming one with the ocean, one with the heavens. It was unspeakably beautiful. At the journey's end, reporters waited to capture the historic moment, but Thomas didn't land at the official finish line. He returned instead to the farm where the geese were born, because that was their true destination. Thomas and Christian had truly succeeded. Yet, just as everyone cheered for them, the director of the Paris Museum refused to recognize Christian's research. He dismissed it all as a dramatic but meaningless performance. He insisted if the geese couldn't return to the Arctic on their own next year, then they were just ordinary birds trained to follow humans. 6 months later, in the blink of an eye, the family returned to the Arctic, the very place where it had all begun. They waited there for days, but the wild geese never appeared. Had Christian really failed? Just then, Thomas looked up.
Elles sont là! Papa, regarde! Ça a marché! Ça a marché!
Ça a marché!
Aka, je suis là! Aka!